I want to bring in Hillary Mann Leverett. She's a professor at American University, has experience working for both the White House and the State Department. Hillary, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
How much credibility can we attach to this report? Because the White House has not given us evidence, proof.
The White House has given us nothing to scrutinize, nothing to look at, and it would behoove everyone here in the United States, policymakers and political elites, after the use of manufactured evidence of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, the same things we're talking about here, used to justify an invasion of Iraq in 2003. After the fact, nothing was there, nothing was found. It would behoove all of us to be very careful and to scrutinize whatever we're allowed to, but we have not been allowed to see any of this so-called evidence.
Yeah, because, and if you look at the timing of this, I mean, you know, we know there's pressure on the Obama administration to do something. That pressure came from Bill Clinton, the former president. I just want to read here what he said. He said, you just think how lame you'd be, and he's referring here to the Obama administration. Suppose I had let 1 million people, 2 million people, be refugees out of Kosovo, a couple of 100,000 people die, and they say, you could have stopped this by dropping a few bombs. Why didn't you do it? You look like a total wuss, his words. And you would be. And then the next day, we got the Obama administration suddenly coming up and saying, hey, you know what? We've just found that they've been using chemical weapons.
I think there are two things that are critically important here. One is the domestic component, but of course, Bill Clinton presided over the massacre of nearly 1 million people in Rwanda, not something that he mentions. But I think the more crass piece here that's operative is it's a political equation getting ready for 2016 for Hillary Clinton to run. Marco Rubio on the Republican side is already out in front sponsoring legislation to arm the rebels in Syria. So I think Bill Clinton doesn't want Hillary Clinton to be left exposed as weak. That's one piece, the domestic political dynamic here, which is important, but I think is not necessarily the most urgent piece. That the White House has publicly acknowledged, it's not being picked up very much, but publicly acknowledged that the urgency here is not actually the use of chemical weapons. After all, it's a little bit crass to say, but only 150 people, if you believe the White House evidence, have been killed with this so-called chemical weapons use out of 93,000. That's not the urgency. The urgency, they have said publicly and explicitly, is Hezbollah entering into the conflict in Syria and making a decisive difference. This is problematic for the White House, for the Obama administration, because Hezbollah was able to come into the conflict with probably just a couple hundred troops, make a decisive difference quickly to change the balance of power, not just in Syria, but vis-a-vis Iran and others in the region that have been against military intervention, like China and Russia. So that's something that Americans do not want to happen. They don't want to let Syria win, and then by extension, they don't want Iran to win, they don't want Russia to win, they don't want China to win.
Right, so is what we're seeing actually a softening up of U.S. public opinion ahead of some major aid to the rebels? Because if you look at this, I mean, we just heard those figures, 93,000 people killed. And the West's response to that, or for that matter, Russia's response to it, is not to find a solution, but to put more weapons in.
Well, actually, the Russian response and the Chinese response and the Iranian response, it doesn't get reported very much here, has been to call for negotiations. Now, the problem that the Americans have with that is that the negotiations would entail negotiating with the Syrian government, with President Assad, something that we find unacceptable because President Obama, from the first days of the conflict, said that Assad had to go. That was a precondition, not just a precondition for negotiations, but a precondition for the entire conflict. He has to go. Well, that hasn't happened. 2 years into it, Assad is winning. All of the people who have not wanted foreign intervention are winning, but that's something that we can't countenance. Yes, they have a military relationship. Russia has had a decades-long military relationship with Syria, as has Iran. But that's not the critical piece here. The critical piece is that they have called for negotiations. That is really the only way forward, as the person from the United Nations said earlier.
Okay, Hillary, let me bring in Nathan King, our correspondent in New York. Let me bring him back into the conversation. Nathan, what are you hearing about the other Security Council members at the UN?
Well, you know, Russia's response to this will be, this is an escalation if indeed the Obama administration does supply weapons to the rebels. Remember, they haven't actually said it yet. They've left themselves some wiggle room, and they know that public opinion is against them. This is very different from the Iraq scenario, for example, where you have French coming out with saying the intelligence is good before the Americans. So you can sense the reluctance. But you're going to get Russia saying this is potentially a mistake, and I think Moscow will realize that this is a very good bargaining position potentially when they go into the G8 and talk about a push for a peace conference. This also, remember, is a time when President Obama is going to have to sit down with his allies at the G8, and that is Britain and France, who have been pushing for an end to the arms embargo and actually sending arms to the rebels as well. So he's got some pleasing to do there.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. Nathan King there in New York. Hilary Mann Leverett here with us in the studio. Thanks to both of you.